On today's World Insight, big efforts to bring COVID infections in the port city of Tianjin and Henan province's Zhengzhou under control, with containment measures in Xi'an paying off as cases drop. What do these efforts mean ahead of China's Spring Festival holiday? And Hong Kong has just sworn in its 7th Legislative Council. Will this lead Hong Kong in a new and more progressive direction?
They all support one country, two systems. They all want Hong Kong to flourish.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. China will test the entire populations of major cities Tianjin and Zhengzhou after over a dozen COVID cases were identified. This follows a lockdown in the city of Xi'an, which now has over 1,900 cases. Many believe China's zero COVID approach has borne fruit as cases in Xi'an begin to drop. What do COVID cases around China mean as China's spring travel rush is under a month away and the Winter Olympic Games is just around the corner? Let's ask experts. For more on the latest on COVID-19, joining us in Washington, D.C., Kate Tulenko, CEO of Corvus Health in New Haven, Xi'an, Associate Professor of Health Policy and Economics from Yale School of Public Health. In Nanjing, Wu Zhiwei, Director from the Center for Public Health Research with Medical School of Nanjing University. Welcome to the program. Now, Kate, to you first, the COVID-19, especially Omicron, seem to be the large majority of the cases taking place in U.S. right now. Do we see any date that is likely to peak?
My guess is that it'll probably peak in early February because many schools are just coming back now into session. And I think that Omicron is going to go quite rapidly through the U.S. schools. Children will bring it home to their families. So we still have that peak about 2 to 3 weeks out.
How are we seeing about the severe cases and also hospitalizations among the latest wave? What's likely to be the case?
Well, with COVID, it's a numbers game. And with Delta, you had fewer people infected, but those infected had more severe disease. With Omicron, you have many more people infected. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, it was estimated that 1 in every 100 Americans had COVID that week. So you're having many more people with COVID. So just by risk analysis, more people are going to fall ill, more high-risk people are going to catch COVID. And so once again, you're seeing hospitals overwhelmed. Now, the death toll in most communities has been lower, but the hospitalizations, are high. And very interestingly, this past week, the U.S. life insurance companies released the fact that all death in working adults in the U.S. 18 to 65 has increased 40% during the COVID pandemic. So it's either that people are having trouble accessing healthcare, they're dying of COVID in the short term, or the long term, sort of this post-COVID inflammatory period, they're having more heart attacks and strokes. But a 40% higher mortality rate is quite significant.
We have already seen some latest incidents in Tianjin, for example, that the community transmission that is taking place right now are actually related to Omicron. Earlier, there was some sense of cautiousness about whether Omicron is already in China. Professor Wu, what do you make of the latest development?
I think the Omicron cases in China will be inevitable because we identify a number of cases in various different cities, and in view of the highly contagious nature of the virus, whatever you do, you may delay the virus from spreading, but eventually it will establish infections. And the Tianjin case is a good example of that. in the school clusters, outbreak, clearly that the virus has established itself somewhere, although we don't know exactly how the virus was introduced and transmitted, but still we have no information who is the primary cases and who are the secondary cases. But this is a good question that we need to look into it.
Now, we know that there are going to be new vaccines, there are going to be new treatment pills in this year, 2022, because it works that way usually. When it is the third year, a lot of things picked up. So can we expect something more capable and much more powerful in dealing with COVID-19?
Oral pills by Merck and Pfizer will make a big difference because previously the only treatment that could be given outpatient was IV, and so it had to be done in special clinics. But as the saying goes, you can't treat your way out of a pandemic. The prevention has to be the foundation of all of our strategies. And if you look globally, China has been the only country that has been able to do testing on a mass scale. In the US, we still aren't able to test enough people. And as been suggested, every American family should be able to test themselves once or twice a week. It's just not possible. So we need to increase production of testing kits and also increase production of the vaccines. Even though in China, North America, and Europe, most people who wanted to get vaccinated have gotten vaccinated, still the majority of the world, most people have not even gotten a single vaccine.
Treatment pills, vaccines, as well as testing. All these are important tools for all of us. But Professor Wu, there's another question, maybe another fortune-telling question. With the speed of Omicron, we already see how transmittable a variant could be for COVID-19. And it is hard to say we're not going to have even more transmittable variant in the future or variants in the future. So Professor Wu, the question really is, before we got these tools definitely going to be able to support us, are we going to also have, unfortunately, herd immunity eventually?
Well, actually, the herd immunity is a very tricky question. Whether herd immunity will prevent us from being infected or not, it's a good question.
Right.
We do have a historical experience that once you build up herd immunity, you may be protected, but it's very much virus dependent. And the problem, it's the circumstances dependent because the modern life is very different from the past. So I think that the best bet is that we have to develop effective vaccines or universal vaccines and therapeutic approach as well as plus public health measures to prevent the pandemic. I think we shouldn't purely rely on the so-called herd immunity. What we have seen is that although in some countries the vaccination rate is pretty high, but still we do get infections. Once the new virus came, then basically we become highly susceptible.
The Winter Olympics is going to take place in a few weeks in Beijing and Zhengzhou, a city close to Beijing. This is a time when Omicron, a very contagious and very transmittable variant of COVID-19 taking place around the world, sweeping around the world. So, Xi'an, tell me more about your sense about how challenging the work might be, given China is still holding dear the zero tolerance of COVID-19 policy.
Yeah, indeed, it's very challenging, especially the flu season and the most recent Tianjin outbreak. So Tianjin is very close to Beijing, and it's also very much approaching Spring Festival. People are traveling, and the transmissibility of the Omicron variant could present a new level of danger, especially to the Olympic Games. So the closed loop management of this the game is very important to make sure that people are in the Olympic Games are having no direct contact with the outside world. So that management is really challenging, and the regulators and the government. But I think more and more things are being arranged. For example, just a couple hours ago, I saw news that Beijing's transportation agencies was discussing how to avoid being a direct contact between the buses, the transportation facilities that carry the the players with the Beijing residents. If there's, for example, a traffic jam or even a car accident, how to make sure that there's no direct contact. So I think those very nuanced, detailed management are very important.
When you look at what happened in the Japanese Olympics, fewer than 500 people tested positive for COVID, and most of those were Japanese Olympic staff who got it from the Japanese community rather than from the Olympians. So I don't expect there to be large breakouts during the Beijing Olympics, but we do need to keep in mind that all of the athletes will be coming in from countries with higher COVID rates than China. So we can expect some outbreaks, and the sort of the worst case scenario would be outbreaks associated with the Olympics combined with people moving around for the spring festival. But certainly if any country can test all the athletes, get the logistics right, it will be China. So I'm not concerned about the Olympics. I would certainly recommend that there not be spectators. I don't think that is a good idea. Or if they do have spectators, that there only be very few and that they be widely spaced out.
There are a lot of unknowns at this point. Nobody knows the situations, how this round of Omicron is likely to go. But Dr. Tulenko, from your own sense, we heard earlier that from the WHO had very likely the year 2022 will see the so-called end of the crisis stage of the COVID-19 worldwide. Now, I don't know whether that's too optimistic for you, but how would people go along with their life? It's already 2 years.
Well, I think there are several ways that we can define a crisis. And to me, in a way, the most important is the overwhelming of the hospitals. Because when hospitals are overwhelmed, it means many people are dying and also people cannot access regular medical care. And I would see that probably in 2022, that will indeed die down, that we won't have those hospitals overwhelmed because more people will be vaccinated or more people will have natural immunity from having caught COVID, and also that the hospitals will be able to eventually hire more staff and be more prepared than they were in the past 2 years. But as far as stores opening, closing, and borders being opened or closed, I expect most of that to normalize as well. I do think we will see more variants this year. For example, in Cyprus, they just found a new variant that combines genetics from Delta with Omicron. So there's a concern that maybe it's as infectious as Omicron and as deadly as Delta. So I do expect more waves, but I think life will normalize because people now know how to handle themselves. They now know how to protect themselves, and with both the natural immunity and the vaccine immunity, we'll see fewer cities in crisis.
Many of us agree that public health is political because it involves so many people's well-being and health and their lives. And we all know that public health is also a balancing art. So we should balance our population health as well as economic and social activities. So making the balance. So laying flat is, of course, one of the worst decisions. So I think since we already have so many effective tools at our disposal, and the three key things, if we do that, and we can balance our population health and economic and social well-being. The first is maintaining stringent public health measures as China have been doing. Second is reaching as high as possible the level of immunity at the population level. And the third is prepare the health system to cure the disease associated with COVID-19 as well as other disease to make sure there's no major crowd out.
I think we need a multi-pronged approach to deal with it because we know that vaccine has its limitation. Therapeutic drugs have its limitation, and the public health approach also have its limitations. So my bottom line is that we need to combine all those three. and make the best use of all the current available tools to deal with the virus, such as the vaccine will provide the first line of defense. And once you have a breakthrough infections, when people develop severe cases, which will be much smaller numbers, then they will be treated by drugs. I think, by doing this, we will be able to deal with the virus.
Thank you so much, the three of you, for joining us. Things are ever evolving, and we'll certainly have more times and possibilities to knock on your door, ask for your expertise. Thank you, really appreciate that. Kate to LegCo, Xi Chen, Wu Zhiwei. Thank you. And this is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Coming up, Hong Kong has just sworn in its 7th Legislative Council. Will this lead Hong Kong in a new and more progressive direction? Let's find out with a series of interviews I did with people in the know from Hong Kong. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Hong Kong's new and patriotic 7th Legislative Council has been sworn in. The Special Administrative Region is preparing for its next chief executive election in March. In what direction is the city heading? We bring you a series of exclusive interviews from Hong Kong to find out.
We have encountered 2 years or more of unprecedented challenges, first with the social unrest, the chaos, the riots, and then a very prolonged period of COVID-19. But through 2 very decisive acts of the central authorities, now we are back on the right track of one country, 2 systems. One is the enactment and implementation of the national security law. The other is, of course, the improvements to Hong Kong's electoral system.
Right.
As a result of those 2 decisions, we are now really very stable. I would say that we can look forward to a very bright future. This one country, 2 systems policy has been regarded as an institutional strength of our country. So in a way, one would easily ask that if that one country, 2 systems have been such an important part of the People's Republic of China's development, and if it is working well, then why would one want to put an end to it? So I'm just pointing out first a fact. The second thing is, of course, because of the 2 important decisions that I have set, the Hong Kong is now really back on the right track. I would say that it is back on the right track since reunification. So after 24 years of experience with this one country, 2 systems, we are now back on the right track. And we will continue to be able to contribute to our country's development. So I hope, I do not have any authoritative source to make this statement, but I feel and I hope that this very successful one country, 2 systems will continue to flourish. And in the last 50, 60 years, we have always been benefiting from the national development. We have always adjusted Hong Kong's position in accordance with the national development. So when the People's Republic of China opened up, then we could be the bridge, we could be the connector with the outside world, and we could relocate our industries to the southern part of mainland, benefiting from the reform and opening up policies. But at this point in time, it is important to remind people that Hong Kong's economic development will have to be very closely integrated with the national development.
Madam Chief Executive, a lot of people here, both in China and beyond, are very impressed by your capability of being proactive, explaining to the central government about what's going on in Hong Kong, asking for the best policy for Hong Kong from the central government, and also interacting with the different sectors in China and also different provinces, industries, and also ministries. How do you see your role in that regard?
I think it is fair to say that I put a lot of emphasis on building a working relationship with my mainland counterparts, where whether they are in the central ministries or they are at the provincial or city level. So I traveled rather extensively into different parts of the mainland and of course to Beijing, Guangdong, and Shenzhen in order to build that sort of not only a working relationship, but a personal relationship to know the party secretaries, the governors, the mayors, so that we can work together and find opportunities for collaboration. How do I get more support and cooperation from my counterparts? I think that perhaps my mainland counterparts feel that I am a very sincere person, that I really have the national interest and Hong Kong's interest at heart. And because they all support one country, two systems. They all want Hong Kong to flourish under one country, two systems, because this is a national policy at the highest level. So whatever they could do, they could support Hong Kong.
Regina, what a pleasure to see you once again. Congratulations for being elected once again as the member of the Legislative Council.
Thank you very much for your congratulations. I greatly enjoy the electoral process.
I know you are having very busy schedule these days because you have a lot of people to express your appreciations for during your campaign, for their support. And I also know that you have a lot of work that you have to roll up your sleeves and get back to work immediately. Tell me more about what do you have in mind as this council's member?
I think under the improved electoral system, our new council will be more broadly representative. You know, we have 3 components. I'm from the geographical constituencies. We are people most closely in touch with public opinion. Then we have functional representatives who will keep us in touch with the views of the professions or industries. Then the election committee, I think we managed to bring into council a broad cross-section of representatives, some from grassroots organizations, some from top management, senior professionals in finance, law, technology. I think they will help enrich the talent pool of the Legislative Council.
Sounds very exciting. You are well known for being able to speak out and talk about what's on your mind, straightforward and sharp. Now, though, the Legislative Council, the makeup of it, have been changing, mainly patriots governing Hong Kong. So I wonder whether you will find more of the same kind among the new members.
I think the principle of patriots governing Hong Kong is a no-brainer. Which country will allow people hostile to the nation to hold important positions of governance? It goes without saying that all those who hold important positions in legislature or the executive branch should be patriots, people who support the constitutional system and bear allegiance to the country and to the SAR, So I think that's a no-brainer. But in spite of that, this underlying principle, the new members, 90 of us, are really from different strata of our society. And there are we have over 53 new members. Many of them are independents in the sense that they have no political affiliation, And so the new council will be really multicolored. It won't be a monolithic block. It will represent a diversity of views and backgrounds.
As the chairwoman of the new People's Party, what do you have in mind? When you get down to work, what is on the top of your agenda? What can you do for the people in Hong Kong?
We must solve the problem of land and housing shortage. During my 8-week campaign on the street, what stuck in my mind is what an elderly person told me. He lives in a public housing estate, a retired civil servant. He said that our government owes our young people a home. Our homes are not affordable. for not only, young people, even for established middle class. Our homes are becoming smaller and smaller, not affordable. We have 200,000 people living in abject conditions in subdivided cubicles. We must tackle housing as a first priority, apart from our constitutional duty of enacting local legislation to implement Article 23 of the Basic Law. The most important livelihood issue is really housing.
Housing is a big issue in Hong Kong. However, we have seen over the past few administrations of Hong Kong HKSAR, that problem has not been solved. Some even argue the problem is getting ever more challenging. Now, Regina, it is no secret that you want to tackle the most difficult question, and yet, what do you have on hand? There are very complicated power structures and wealth structures regarding providing the land for people with public housing. Tell me more about what you can do.
To solve the housing problem, you need to speed up land production, greatly increase and speed up land production. And we need to really shake off past fetters. We can develop green belts. The government, the chief executive has set up a working group to study how to release the Zhou and Tong, that is ancestral lands, and we need to speed up the development procedures. I think we really need to discard a lot of the outdated, lengthy consultation drawbacks, like no reclamation in Victoria Harbour, that sort of thing. A lot of the procedures are outdated. We need to do a lot to speed up development procedures and greatly increase land production, speed up all that. I think the Northern Metropolis Development Plan is a great opportunity for Hong Kong.
That's all we have for this edition of World Insight. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us, and bye for now.